and welcome to Haydn Behind the Music Stand. I'm your host, Patty Ryan, and with me is David Gonzales, who is a freelance guitarist based in San Francisco, California. He also is an aspiring media composer and sound designer to compose for film and video games, among other commercial entities. And we'll be talking about discovering other genres of music outside classical music. Welcome, David. Thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, so it's basically all Natalie's fault that I know you.
Because 100%.
Yeah,
there's
because
no other connection.
No, there's absolutely not. Well, I mean, of course, there's San Francisco Conservatory as a connection, but I only really got to know you when you and Natalie began dating, and you guys have been dating ever since.
Yes, it's been a very long time. She will remind me that.
Okay. And of course, Natalie Rainey is a past guest on the podcast. Her main episode is called You're So Pretty and You're So Smart and So ... But she also is featured on our Christmas winter extravaganza, Easicles, and she actually coined that term. So anyway, we love Natalie, as everyone who really meets her does. Yeah, she's a great person.
Amazing cellist too.
Yes, she is. We all need to tell her that more often.
Of course, definitely. Everyone needs to be told that.
That's also true. But it also is really fun, not just getting to know you through Natalie and hanging out in San Francisco, but also at Spoleto, USA. You actually were there. It was a rather unusual situation. Normally, Spoleto is just an orchestral festival that happens in Charleston, South Carolina. But for a particular piece, John Kennedy, who is the conductor, artistic director of the festival, asked you and Ramon of Ignition Duo to come and perform. I can't remember. What was it, for the Lachenmann, or was it?
That's right. It's for the Helmut Lachenmann opera, The Little Match Girl, which is a super intense piece of music in which I don't think any member of the orchestra plays a single note in a normal way on their instrument for an hour and a half straight. And it was amazing. It was awesome. And Helmut was there, and he was the kindest, most gentlest, and brilliant person to help us rehearse, and was super generous with his feedback and his time, and it was really cool.
That's so cool that you got to meet him too. I mean,
yeah, he's just this really weird presence. He's this older, sort of crusty German man, and you would, looking at him, think that he was intimidating and scary, but he starts talking and he's super nice and just generous, and his music doesn't sound like that at all. His music is terrifying.
Was that also the premiere of his opera, The Little Match Girl?
I think it was
at least the American.
North American premiere, yeah, which was really cool. And it was accompanied by this really, apparently, I never got to see it because of the way it was staged. The staging of it was this shadow puppetry that was happening beneath the orchestra. So the orchestra was up on these risers in the auditorium. It was 60 feet above the ground, this huge metal lattice work that we had to climb up on with our instruments. And we had this huge safety demonstration beforehand just to make sure that nobody got seriously hurt, because it was kind of sketchy. In turn, because of that, we never got to see the abstract shadow puppetry that accompanied the opera, which was, it's an opera, so the visual element is
very important.
A pretty big part of it, yeah. But I read the review of it and it seemed like it was really bizarre, which would fit with the music, which was amazing.
I have to admit, I didn't get a chance to see it, but I heard so many stories from that experience, and I know you guys worked your butts off, really, getting that prepared, and the weight of it being a premiere and all those things. But I also remember hearing a lot of positive feedback from it too. The overall experience, being grueling, but also a very cool one at that.
Definitely. It's kind of one of those experiences which I definitely sort of experienced, this trajectory, and I think some of the other people in the ensemble did too, where at first you're looking at this score and it just doesn't make any sense, and you experience frustration, and then at a certain point you experience maybe resentment and anger towards the composer because you're working on this thing and it's not coming together in the way you expect, or you haven't acclimated to this very unique sound world that this person has created, which is totally unique to this piece of music, maybe not even their whole body of work.
Right.
So then once you kind of go through this whole process of working on it and coming to terms with it and then performing it and doing it successfully, it's actually even more rewarding than possibly playing your favorite piece of music.
Right.
So I witnessed this change in the ensemble of not having a good time to really realizing the whole time
what a cool piece that is.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Well, anyway, I just wanted to mention Spoleto because, of course, that's dear in my heart from all the great food and great experiences I had in that city. I feel like every time I bring it up, I always talk about the foods.
Yeah, it was a lot of fun. And guitarists don't normally get to go to band camp or orchestra camp, whereas all you string players did that every
Very
summer for
seasoned.
your whole lives. Yeah. So it was kind of cool to like witness that firsthand, even though had aged out past the whole like band camp summer experience thing.
Yeah.
It was still fun.
Yeah, totally. Overall, again, from hanging out with you, I think what always struck me about you in particular is your sense of humor. And it's not really my funny story, but it's a very specific characteristic of who you are. You always keep me on my toes when it comes to humor. It's very dry and witty at the same time.
Oh, well, thank you.
In a positive way. I don't know.
I know that your friend Cindy and Natalie's friend told Natalie one time that she never knows if I'm being serious or not, and it like makes her uncomfortable. So she just, every time I talk to her, she's just looking over at Natalie, even if I'm being completely sincere and genuine. She's like, is he joking? Like, no, I'm not even remotely joking right now. It's like, I'm asking you, would you like a glass of water?
And I think for me, it's an endearing side because I feel like it's a fun way of being humorous with one another, too. Anyway, did you have a funny story about me at any point? I don't know, my life?
Yeah. Well, when you were a child.
Yes, exactly right.
Yeah, actually, I kind of have a funny little thing that it has to do with Spoleto as well. So when we were there, it was a pretty long time that we were there, like several weeks. And I remember my girlfriend Natalie would call me, and there's a big time difference because it's on the East Coast and we're here on the West Coast. And she would call and be like, hey, how's it going? Checking in, like, just want to talk. I'd be like, oh, sorry, I can't talk right now. I'm hanging out with Patty. Oh, I'm sorry, I'm like hanging out with your friends. And she's like alone on the West Coast. And here I am like stealing all of her friends, you and Cindy. And I'm like, I can't talk to you right now, Natalie. I'm like hanging out with your friends. Oh, God, so uncool. You're making me look so lame.
Also, I'm sorry, Natalie, but I mean, it was also fun to hang out with you, so...
Yeah, it's fun to get to hang out with your partner's friends and to get to know them outside the context of dinner parties and the normal kind of thing. It gives you more insight into your partner too. You like, these are the kind of people they associate with.
Right, exactly. Well, I mean, I think Natalie has a really awesome friend group. So I'm not from a bias.
You guys are great. I always feel welcome and at home.
Anyway, are you ready for some Spitfire questions?
Sure, let's do it.
Okay, Mozart or Beethoven?
If you had asked me 5 years ago, I would have said Mozart, but Beethoven right now.
So what changed?
I had this hang up with Beethoven, whereas I was the music snob, even if you can reach an even higher level of music snobbery than like being the classical music snob, where I was like, oh, well, everyone just likes Beethoven because he's the best. I don't need any of that. So I kind of was like, whatever, there's so much hype. I mean, obviously he's a great composer, but like, is he really a god? And that was clouding my mind. It was preventing me from being able to listen to the music because it was constantly being celebrated. And while that's not a bad thing inherently, it's just sort of like, you know, leave a little room for everyone else.
There's a lot of really interesting points that I wanted to bring up in there, though, because, I mean, especially last year was Beethoven's 250th birth year celebration. And everyone, including my quartet, was on the bandwagon of celebrating Beethoven and all his music, all these symphonies, all the string quartets, all the sonatas, whatever. And then, of course, when COVID hit, everything was shut down. And then on top of that, when George Floyd was murdered, then everyone started reshifting what we're really programming and what it means to program the same composer all the time. And I agree totally. I mean, for me, my answer would have been Beethoven for this question, but it is a question of, do we have to pound it into our audience's heads all the time? You know, or do we have to constantly celebrate him all the time? We should leave room for voices that have been unheard in the past, you know.
Absolutely. I also play guitar, so I've never played any Beethoven. I mean, the same goes for Mozart, and a lot of these heavyweights that we call them in the classical world, I just have never been able to play the music. Maybe arrangements sometimes, but you know, that's a translation.
Well, I guess unfortunately my Spitfire questions are not necessarily designed for guitarists in mind, but my second Spitfire question is Shostakovich or Prokofiev?
Oh my gosh, those are different people? Wow, I like them both. I'd have to say Shostakovich just because I know more
of it.
Of his stuff.
Fair enough. Netflix or video games?
Video games.
Any particular video games?
Yeah, I love Skyrim. I
Uh-huh.
love like open world RPG games where you can spend 100 hours trying to figure out how much stuff you want to carry around.
Yeah.
Basically, never getting anywhere in the game beyond just improving your carry weight so you can pick up more junk as you walk through the world.
Right.
That's really fun to me.
Skyrim was one of the 2 or 3 games that kept me sane throughout the early stages of the pandemic.
Oh, really? Had you not played it before?
No, it was gifted to me for my birthday, and so I just dove headfirst into that game.
Perfect timing.
Yeah, and Natalie and I have actually related to each other about Skyrim, and she's like, oh, I should play it too. So I wonder if was that part of your influence, or did she?
Well, I think I was the original Skyrim player.
Okay.
But she started playing right around the same time, and we got a PlayStation, and then we're arguing over who got to play Skyrim.
Got it. Basil or cilantro?
Basil.
Harry Potter, Star Wars, or Lord of the Rings?
Lord of the Rings.
Symphony or chamber music?
Chamber music.
Yeah, I was going to say, I realize this is also not necessarily designed for a guitarist. However, I guess I could say for symphony, you could say if you wanted to be a soloist with an orchestra.
Oh, God, no. Would I want to sit in front of 120 people who are incredible musicians and have nobody hear me?
Well, you'll be amplified, though.
So I'm the only one who needs to be amplified out of 120 people who can make enough sounds just on their own.
Okay, but chamber music.
Chamber music all the way.
Sounds good. Coffee or tea?
Coffee.
Favorite practice room?
I actually did do a summer festival a while back in Canada called Domaine Forget.
Yeah, I've been there.
Oh, cool.
Yeah.
It's awesome, isn't it?
Yes. Actually, that might be one of the places I would mention that too. Like the little huts there.
Yes, it was amazing because you're just in a tiny little hut in the woods and you've got all day and the weather is like beautiful and the scenery is beautiful and you just play your instrument in a hut.
Yeah, and it also
amazing.
overlooks the St. Lawrence River, which is really beautiful as well.
Yeah.
And if you get the right one, you can just open that door and have this beautiful scenery
Right. Some of them were kind of run down and there's like spiders and they're
but
like
it's in the middle
damp.
of nowhere. I mean, what do you
Yeah.
expect?
Yeah, exactly.
I'm fine with the spiders, But
It did get kind of creepy at night though if you stay like past dark and then you have to like walk a little bit through the woods and you're like, what? This seems like the beginning to a horror movie. Like,
Right.
I would wrap it up before dark.
Right. And also, like, most music festivals are in the middle of nowhere, in the middle of the woods. So,
That's true.
it is a recipe for a horror film. If any script writer wants to write that.
There we go.
Yeah. Favorite professor shout out?
Mickey Jones. Mickey Jones was my high school guitar teacher and still great friend. And he's just an amazing, generous person and musician. And I still look to him for advice when I need it. And yeah, he's just always a great person to talk to about music or life or anything. He's an awesome person.
Nice. Also cool name.
Right. Well, actually, I have a funny story about that. So when I was starting to play guitar, I started playing on my own and my dad played guitar and he discovered that I had an interest in it. So we got out the phone book and looked up in the local music store and we called and they gave me a list of names and my dad wrote them down. On the list was Mickey Jones. And I'm like, well, obviously I'm going to pick the guy named Mickey Jones. And that's the whole reason I'm a classical guitarist. I went in and I started learning like Foo Fighters and 311 songs. Like electric guitar, and he ended up getting a job at my high school and they had a classical guitar program. And
what? That's nuts.
I know, it's an amazing thing. And actually a lot of people from that school ended up going to the San Francisco Conservatory for a while. There was like one graduating senior a year being like shipped off to SFCM.
Well, that makes sense though.
Yeah, I mean, it's a great place to go and it was a good place for him to recommend. But also it's a testament to him as a teacher that there were so many random high school kids getting like good enough to go off to like study conservatory or at least wanting to do that.
It's all from his name though. That's the only reason why you're a guitarist today is because
totally happenstance.
Name.
That's why you should be very careful when you name your children.
Right.
Anyone out there who's expecting.
Right, exactly. All right. Most inspired musical hero of any genre?
I would say Julian Lage. He's a jazz guitarist and he's one of those virtuoso, prodigious types of musicians. I feel like I've always really enjoyed jazz and it never quite made sense to me as a guitarist. I didn't connect with any jazz guitarists per se, but I really liked the genre. And when I heard this person's playing, actually it was an album that he did of all acoustic compositions that he made that you probably wouldn't even classify as jazz, even though they were influenced influenced by practice of it where there's like improvisation involved. But it was all more kind of folk songwriting inspired, but solo acoustic guitar music. And solo acoustic guitar music is like what I've been doing, just in a classical sense and on a nylon string guitar versus a steel string guitar, and using fingernails instead of a pick. So there's some differences there, but that album really clicked and it really opened my ears in a sense to like the way that I could play guitar differently with the instrument that I was trained on or that I knew how to play. So yeah, I would say that was really inspiring for me.
Nice. Most transformative performance experience?
Oh God. When did I like performing ever? I'm like which panic attack do I want to describe?
Oh, but it's so real. It's so true.
Yeah.
Or which one was masked in other emotions other than a panic attack?
Yeah. From which day emerge most victorious. I need to like talk to a therapist about something. This is like I have like a block, like I can't access it. There's like trauma or something. Like
so we cannot answer the question either.
No. I'm thinking I wanna come up with something good. Transformative is a very powerful word. Well, I'll say that what I've come to appreciate is something that I need to do in order to survive as a musician and be healthy and take it one day at a time is to not treat any one performance as being all that important. Mm-hmm. So nowadays, not like I'm just like walking in unprepared or like I don't care, but it's not quite so serious anymore. Even though it's real and important, it's not the biggest deal in the world that I'm performing. It's like kind of like more like, yeah, I'm just gonna play guitar because that's what I do and that's what I've worked at being good at doing, and hopefully it reaches some people. So thereby it lacks the power to be transformative for me. Maybe for someone else who is younger.
Well, then my question is, it doesn't have to be in a performance that you discovered this, but when did you come to that kind of level of wisdom?
So I actually came to that through recovering from injury. So I realized that, a lot of the injury was like a repetitive strain type of thing that is really common and happens to a lot of people and is oftentimes hanging out for a long time, and you don't recover in the same way that you would say from like a sprained ankle or something that's like more easily diagnosed by the medical community. Because I think there is some emotional and psychological trauma associated with being injured as a musician. In my journey through recovering, I tried to come to a better place about being a player and performing, and I ended up with the outlook that I have now, for better or for worse.
No, I think that is for better. I don't want to blame music school, but I'm going to blame it a little bit.
Let's do that.
In that there's so much pressure on students in conservatory settings of standing out and of always making every performance be their best because it's representative of who they are in that moment, that I think gets really twisted in a lot of students' minds. I fell for it myself. So I've also had the realization of not every performance is going to be the end all be all. This is who you are as a musician. This is what people are going to think about you for the rest of your life. The other thing that I also would say about being in school versus not being in school is that you get more opportunities to perform the same piece. Generally speaking, you get multiple concerts with the same program. Rather than at school, you just have to do one major recital and then boop, you're done with the piece kind of thing. So
totally not the way it works, because there's no way you can just be constantly learning new music to perform every time you're playing a concert. If you're like making a living off of playing concerts, that would be insane.
Right. But I'll move on to the next Spitfire question.
I keep forgetting this is Spitfire.
No, it's fine. This is what always happens. Next piece you'd like to learn?
I've always wanted to learn how to improvise better. And one of the ways that I'm trying to do that is to learn different jazz tunes and to learn how to play over the chord changes. So one of the ones that I want to learn play over is Desafinado by Antonio Carlos Jobim. It's like a bossa nova tune.
Oh, cool.
But it has like a really beautiful melody and really beautiful chord changes.
Well, we'll put it on the Spotify playlist.
Hey, let's do it.
Okay, you made it through the Spitfire questions.
Awesome.
Okay, cool. So David, can you walk me through your musical origin story? You started a little bit with Mickey Jones, but
that's That's right.
Can you continue from there and talk about how you got the bug of becoming a musician and then your travels through the conservatory / professional life that you have now?
How much time do you have now? So I started piano lessons with, I'm going to just name drop all my teachers because I think it's important that these people get credit, even though I don't think I remember my piano teacher's name properly. Her name was Suzanne. I think it was Dubois. And I grew up in Albuquerque, New Mexico. Took piano for 2 years with Suzanne starting in 4th grade. Did that for a couple years. And then when I went to middle school, I had to take band, chorus, or orchestra. My dad had his old saxophone from middle school. So saxophone it was for a couple years. And then in middle school on my own, I picked up guitar because my dad's also a guitarist, and I started just playing on his guitars, and I was like really into like alternative rock of the day.
That's our generation though. I mean, yeah.
Right, of course. Yeah, the first song I learned was Glycerin or Glycerine by Bush, and I just learned the bass line on one string. And my dad found out that I was like doing this, and so he encouraged me to take lessons, and that's how I got in contact with Mickey and did that private lessons for like a year. And then, as I mentioned, my school had a guitar program, just like orchestra and band. They also had guitar ensemble. And so we all played classical guitar. The teachers would make arrangements of classical pieces. Like I remember we played this Grieg Goldberg suite or guitar. We played some like Rossini overtures. At one point we played the Nutcracker arranged for guitar orchestra, like the Nutcracker suite.
Wow.
So it was like some pretty reachy stuff for high school guitar ensemble. But it was great, and it was cool because you got to practice for like an hour every day at school. At a certain point, I got more into that and started taking lessons outside of school from time to time with Mickey and with a couple other people in the area. And yeah, I decided I wanted to go to college for music.
So I guess, was it just that you realized that it was coming naturally to you? Like, I guess that's where I just am curious. Did you only go into classical guitar because of the program? Because
let's blame it on the program.
Well, no, I mean, because as a guitarist, it's a very versatile instrument. You can do so many genres. With the cello, you're kind of stuck with classical for the most part.
Classical guitar is weird because oftentimes people will start playing guitar on their own when they're in like middle school or high school because they want to play the music that they like. And guitar is such a cool instrument because like you can do that. I'm not saying that like cellists don't like Beethoven or whatever, but like, you know, you can play the popular music that you're listening to as a teenager on your instrument.
Right. And it's also like the instruments that like girls will like swoon over back in the day, I guess. I don't know.
Yeah. They never swooned over it. they don't know. Not back in the day, not now. But that was part of the intention for sure. Because you just want to be
it's a cool
like
instrument.
That cool. Yeah, you want to like wear your straps super low, like Billie Joe Armstrong
totally
from Green Day, and totally get a repetitive strain injury from bending your wrist in an unnatural position. But that's for another day. Yeah. But then like at a certain point, there's always like this weird like push from your teacher or whoever it is, or from like your grandparents or something, where it's like, oh, you're good at guitar, you should learn classical. That's like the ultimate. That's like where it's at, you know? So if you're a really good guitarist, you gotta learn classical. And so I feel like a lot of the guitarists that I like know and stuff just kind of like we all ended up classical guitarists somehow, because it's not the same thing where it's like orchestra or you start when you're 4 years old or whatever, and that's like the only way to play the instrument in a sense, or not the only way but the most common way. But I feel like most guitarists are coming from this rock proto background. That's kind of how it was for me. And I along the way, you know, you just fall in love with learning how to play this way, and you're part of a small community of people who are really super into this kind of esoteric way of playing the instrument. If you look at the way the instrument is played throughout the world, it's like such a small slice of that. Yeah, it's just like a really unique world, and I just fell into it.
So it's a mixture of just nudging from elders, let's put it.
Yeah.
And also kind of wanting to be accessing.
You want to take the high road.
Yeah, well, I was going to say unlocking that like next level if we're thinking about it like a video game or something. Yeah.
Yeah.
After deciding to pursue classical guitar as a major, where did did you end up going?
So I went to Northwestern University in Evanston, Illinois, just right outside of Chicago. And my teacher there was Ann Waller, who was great and like really gave me a super solid foundation and got me to figure out how to like sit right with the guitar and just kind of like all these things that you got to do when you're trying to play it. Yeah, like when you're trying to get to the big leagues. Yeah, and I had a lot of amazing experiences there. And what was really cool there is they had a ton of visiting guest artists who would give master classes all the time. So got a lot of exposure and a lot of horrifying moments playing for some fancy visiting guest artist who doesn't know who you are or have any kind of long-term interest in your development as a musician and really lays it down and then like drops the mic and walks out and then you never see him again. And it leaves you shattered and just wondering why you're doing it.
Yeah, but that's a really good, can I interrupt? Because that's a really good point again about part of conservatory life as it was when we were experiencing it, which is, you know, we get these master classes, which are really great performance opportunities. And it's also really great to get to know other pedagogues outside of your school, right? To get exposed in that way. But at the same time, sometimes they are a bit to what you're just describing. It seems like there's a value judgment based on how you performed in that one moment and how you performed throughout the master class situation that then doesn't have any follow-up or follow through with.
Totally. It's like a really weird concept because it's like learning should be like a safe space, but it's also a performance. So you're like performing the act of learning for everyone else's benefit, which is great in the audience. But I think it can be amazing, you know, and like because there's heightened stakes in some sense, because it is like some ways a performance, it's elevated. But I think the artist has to be careful and mindful of that.
Right. And sometimes they're not always. The other thing that I also realized as a student, when I would perform in a master class, I would like not remember anything that the master was telling me because I was just in total shock. So I'd have to watch myself back to really remember some of the things that they were telling me, you know? So yeah, it's like kind of a counterintuitive, it can be a counterintuitive way of learning.
Yeah, totally. Yeah. I mean, I think like you just eyes glaze over when you're up there and you're just trying to get through it. And they're asking you to do things that you can't do or whatever. So you're trying not to make a fool of yourself. Actually, interestingly enough, I feel like some of the best experiences I've had in a masterclass are with guest artists who aren't native English speakers. So there's that language barrier. They can't berate you in your native language. So they just have to communicate via musical gesture and like playing something back or just, you know, communicating some other way. And there's a lot to be learned that way. It's kind of like playing with a great player. You just kind of learn by playing with them, just by being present in that moment.
Like an apprenticeshipness of it.
For sure. Or like if you're in a chamber group with someone who's more experienced than you are, it's like you can learn a lot from that.
Totally. Those were some of my best coaching experiences, were playing with the master, quote unquote, teacher rather than being coached distantly. If they were immersed in the group with me, I learned the most, in my opinion. So yeah, so continue. Sorry, you're meeting a bunch of outside guitarist, guest artists coming in all these masterclass settings, and this was all at Northwestern.
Yeah, right. And so after that experience, I went back to Albuquerque for a year and actually taught high school music for a year as an internship, coaching, conducting high school guitar orchestras, and started getting private students and getting into that world of being a teacher myself. That was my like in between year. I was preparing for auditions for graduate school, and that's when I ended up going to San Francisco Conservatory.
Sure. Did you always want to be a private instructor, or were you just kind of testing the waters between your undergraduate to graduate?
Yeah, it wasn't really something that I necessarily like said I wanted to be when I grew up, but it was the path in a sense. And I didn't really know that kind of when I signed up for this whole thing, especially, you know, any type of musician or any type of like artisan or artist, there's an element of being a mentor to those who are coming up after you or whatever. And it's also like the best way to make money when you have a degree in guitar. It's like, what better way to leverage the amount of time you've spent studying this very specific thing than other people who want that knowledge and want access to it. I was happy to start teaching right away. And I think it's a totally different set of skills to being a good player. There's no generalizations I can say about it. It's just like some people are great players and great teachers.
If I can jump in, I was just going to say, I think that it's a different kind of skill that you learn outside of just performing. The skill of learning how to teach teach is so different. And I mean, that's why some of the best teachers are so coveted, because being able to communicate this awkwardness of playing these instruments and how to do so without injury is, and also with artistic vision, it's a skill, totally. So I know, I was just curious at that point, that was kind of you testing the waters of dabbling in that, at least.
Yeah. I think the thing about teaching is that there's kind of two big sides to it. There's the whole side of imparting the knowledge of the instrument and how to play the instrument the correct way, at least, technically with a solid foundation, so that you have, access to everything that you will need as a musician. And having that knowledge is really important. And being able to do it doesn't necessarily mean that you have the knowledge of how to pass that on to another person, because, you have to be able to understand where they're coming from. So that's the other side of it, is like the human side, where it's like most people, when you're learning an instrument, it's like your teacher can tell you what to do, but they can't learn you what to do. Like, there's no way that they can tell you what it's supposed to feel like when you flex your index finger to pluck the string. You have to like come to that understanding yourself. So the person who's there with you in the room has to be the kind of like supportive person who understands that process and is going to just like be there for you while you figure it out, while you teach yourself in their presence.
Yeah, totally.
Basically.
Yeah, because every body, literally every body is different.
Absolutely.
Like my hand shape, for instance, is mine only. And people are double jointed, or, God knows what. There's all kinds of idiosyncrasies in each other's body. So there's no way that we can be a facsimile of our teachers.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Sorry for that.
No, it's fine. No, it's fine. So you were teaching, and then you were applying for grad school, and then you got accepted to San Francisco Conservatory of Music, which is then where you moved away and went to that conservatory.
Yes, that's correct. And my teacher there was Sturgill Simpson, that amazing musician and person.
Speaking of great pedagogues of instruments, yeah.
He's incredible. And just speaking of being in the presence next to somebody who just plays the instrument so well and understands so many things about how to play music well and how to play chamber music, how to play with other people, because he has this amazing duo with his brother Odair, and they're just in complete lockstep with each other, playing their own arrangements of classic pieces. And Sergio's an amazing composer as well, so just like such a well-rounded musical individual. It was awesome to get to know him a little bit and learn what I could.
So after the conservatory years, then what did you end up doing?
So I ended up, when I finished, I got a lot of teaching gigs and was supporting myself through teaching lots of guitar lessons, and also kind of trying to get a chamber group off of the ground. I had a guitar duo called Ignition Duo, and we started out as kind of a classical guitar duo, just playing the pieces that we wanted to play, and eventually we morphed into this electric guitar contemporary classical thing, and we're doing a lot of commissioning composers and playing different programs with all kinds of different interactive electronics and piece with spoken word. It was like reading poetry while I was playing guitar. It was really interesting to kind of dive into that world of new music. And then that's how we ended up becoming a part of Spoleto, because my duo partner Ramon had done the festival the year earlier, and they were going to play this piece that required 2 electric guitars, this Lachenmann operas. So got asked to come back to do that. And so we're, just doing the new music ensemble thing, applying for grants and commissioning composers and playing concerts. And so it was a lot of fun. I'm really proud of what we did. We released an album of pieces that we commissioned for 2 electric guitars, and it's pretty uncommon instrumentation. So it was awesome to be building that, repertoire.
Yeah.
And also for a while, I was a member of the San Francisco Guitar Quartet, which had been kind of around for a while. Yeah, that was fun to play with them, because we got to do a tour where we, went all through the Mid-South and got to visit some places that I never had been to and play for some unfamiliar faces, meet a lot of young guitarists, and that was really fun.
Yeah.
Throughout this time of kind of being a freelance musician, doing a lot of teaching, doing some performing, a lot of rehearsing, and kind of getting these ensembles off the ground, I kind of started maybe realizing that I had other musical interests that hadn't been tended to throughout this whole time of going to a conservatory and then trying to bang it out as a freelance musician and get to that like concert artist status. And I think that my neglect of a lot of the things that got me started in guitar was holding me back as a musician, and I wasn't really pursuing the most authentic expression of my musical self. And that process of discovery is ongoing and has worn a lot of different hats, from me realizing that I needed to play in bands and buying a bass guitar and playing in a bunch of bands for a year, then realizing that, oh, I needed to be able to shred electric guitar like all my metal heroes from high school, and trying to go down that rabbit hole, and realizing, no, what I need to do is be a jazz guitarist and learn how to improvise and play changes. And now I'm kind of realizing those all share one common thing, which is, writing my own music and sort of just being my own independent artist, in the sense that, I can make whatever music I want to make. So that's kind of where I'm at right now and trying to pursue that.
Yeah, I mean, that sounds like a very profound discovery of who you are as an artist, and that there's so much of your upbringing that was instructed to you to do, and naturally you picked up a guitar to be the medium for that. But I mean, was there any trigger point along the way, other than just dabbling in bands and jazz and all these things, that, like, how long ago was that, I guess, is maybe more or less my question. Yeah.
Well, yeah, it's been ongoing for 10 years, pretty much immediately after finishing school. It's kind of like you emerge from the tunnel, and then you're tending to other interests that you didn't have either the time or the permission, or even, nobody's telling you what you can and can't do per se.
Well, yeah, I understand what you're saying.
Self-imposed, exile on the island of classical guitar. And it's been a long time. But yeah, I guess sort of zeroing in on what I realized that where I want to focus my energy, because there's only so much time on Earth, was probably, a couple years ago. And there's no particular trigger other than that it just was the culmination of all this thought, and at least the path revealed itself to me, and I decided that why not go for it.
Cool. And I don't know if this was just a coincidence that happened, that the program that you are in currently at the Conservatory back at San Francisco was created not too long ago. Did that coincide with your self-reflection discovery of all this?
Well, yeah, it's a pretty new program. Maybe it's like 6 years old, or I want to say. And I think I remember hearing about it in like an alumni email, that there's this new thing, and kind of reading about that, being like, oh, wow, I wish that kind of thing had been around when I could have done something like that. Arbitrarily limiting myself to say that I can't do that anymore because I'm done, which is insane. But, it's kind of I think it's a pretty common place to end up in when you're like late early career, or like early mid career. You're just kind of like, well, I can't really do anything else now. So yeah, I think it took a while for me to come around. So it is a coincidence that this program is really unique, in the sense that it's at a conservatory and it has access to a lot of the things that music schools have. Like, good performers are there for the composers to work with, and great instructors, but it's also really focused on this composition and technology related to writing music for media, is the simplest way to put it. Different media. Basically, it's not concert music.
Right.
There's not a ton of programs out there like that, and it just so happens that the town that I live in has one.
How is that experience going back to school for this been?
It's been awesome, really. It's been a totally positive experience in so many ways. Going back to school when you're a little bit older is a totally different experience, and so I feel like I'm able to really get the most out of it, and it has a lot to offer. It's an intense program, and there's so much to learn, because it's just this whole world that I didn't really know anything about, and it's just been split wide open, and I'm like drinking from the fire hose, as they say. It's probably gonna take some time to absorb everything that's been thrown at me, but yeah, I've learned a ton in the span of 4 or 5 months.
That's great. I mean, that's exactly like what you're searching for, I think, right?
Absolutely.
Yeah. Has your education changed or differed in any way based on the pandemic?
Well, yeah, absolutely. Big time, because it's all remote, which luckily one of the keywords in the program is technology. So they've come up with some clever ways to kind of get around it, or not necessarily more clever than using Zoom. But I think the people involved have a lot of technological aptitude. They're making the absolute most out of it. Case in point, for a class, we wrote demo music for a fiction fictional video game that was then passed along to a team at Sony Music, the center at Sony that does video game music, and they gave us feedback on it and interacted with us on our pieces, and eventually we ended up doing a remote recording session in Nashville, and the whole thing was like done over Zoom. We're like giving feedback to the performers, and the engineers and the producers are also on another Zoom line. So this like highly complex operation was just working flawlessly, and because that's what these studios have been doing for the past year, is working remotely. And
yeah, I mean, that's
probably
wild.
not going to change
If they got a way of doing it without flying a bunch of people everywhere, I mean,
exactly.
Wow, that's crazy.
It's cool to be kind of getting into this at this time and getting a glimpse of how it works, because it does seem like there's going to be a lot of this remote recording and remote producing, and that's going to stick around in a big way.
Very cool. Well, are you ready to take a break?
Sure, yeah.
Okay, cool. We'll be right back. Welcome back from the break. So I am really curious about your discovery of other genres of music. So you started to kind of talk about it a little bit in your musical origin story and your discovery of playing in different bands and trying to learn improvisation. But let's dive deeper into that conversation. As you said, you literally started off playing all the alternative rock that we grew up in the 90s and 2000s. And obviously that's just part of our pop culture, I would say, right? As musicians too. I mean, I'm inspired by those guys as well. And that you were kind of thrust into the classical music genre on guitar. Mm-hmm. But when did you, or how did you find interests in other genres of music along the way?
Well, I've always, like you said, just enjoyed the music of my youth throughout. And I've always kind of been like a listener of things that are coming out. I don't want to say trying to stay current, but intrigued within certain genres. And if I hear an artist that I like, then going down a rabbit hole and trying to find out more about them and what influenced them and where they're coming from. And so I always did that with, the bands that I was obsessed with when I was a teenager. And I did that in Conservatory with classical composers when I was in that world. So, and the older I get, it's like music listening isn't as big a part of my daily experience as it was maybe when I was a younger person. So I have to kind of make a little bit more of an effort to seek out new things. And so that's why it kind of feels more like a hobby now, or like something I'll do when I have downtime is I'll just pop into a chair, crack open Spotify and just go down a rabbit hole, and also have a tab of Wikipedia open and try to like read about the people or the genres that I'm listening to and just soak in a little bit of something different. And I often don't even remember anything that I discovered. So I think I've learned that the like button is very useful, because then it remembers for you that you liked a song or an artist. So yeah, it's like a practice, like a thing that I've always done. And that's gotten so much easier now with the internet and with streaming music services than it was as a teenager in Albuquerque, New Mexico, which for being a big town kind of is isolated and doesn't have a ton of musical acts coming through. I think it's changed right now. I can't speak to what's going on in Albuquerque in the moment musically, but when I was younger, it wasn't really popping. I'm sure like Minneapolis has an amazing music scene, like the epicenter of funk.
Yeah, and Lizzo and like Prince. But
yeah, Prince, right? The Minneapolis sound. There's a thing, right? Isn't there like that Minneapolis sound? There's no the Albuquerque sound. Maybe there is.
I don't know.
As someone I've been really into their music and content creation. I can't believe I like a content creator, but this person, Cory Wong, makes really incredible content where he's a guitarist, a funk guitarist primarily, and famously plays with the band Vulfpeck, who's like a pretty big funk band right now. Yeah, but he makes a lot of content about life as a musician and really talking about the things that don't often get talked about in terms of finance and how to be in a band or how to like be professional. And it's refreshing and it's fun and it's lighthearted. It's not like a lecture. So yeah, I enjoy his music. His guitar playing is sick, but also he seems pretty cool.
Cool.
And right around the corner from you.
I find it fascinating that that is what you end up doing as your recreation, is to go and scour through Spotify. That's just not something I inherently do, and I'm just lazy and I just keep playing all the same stuff that I like and I know I like. But to actually sit down and open up your creative musical world in our profession, I feel like that's pretty rare to do.
Really?
Yeah, well, okay. Like, I feel like a lot of times, like, kind of a go-to is, like, you just go to your go-to people, and that's what you listen to over and over and over again.
I mean, I do that too, yeah.
Like
for
Beethoven,
sure,
for instance, right? Like, that's what I'm saying, yeah.
I mean, there's definitely, like, some things where you're not always doing, like, super deep listening, whereas if you have favorite tracks or favorite pieces, the more you listen to them, the more you get to know them, the more you get out of it. So perusing the, like, back section of the record store or whatever is maybe not the same activity, but you never know when you'll find that deep cut that you'll listen to 1,000 times over and over again, because that just resonates in some way.
Yeah, I
think it's the Conservatory.
Oh.
Well, you know, and I don't know if it's avoidable or not in the pursuit of virtuosity or musical excellence, but there's an inherent narrowing of focus that happens with that. And that can be really productive for a lot of things. It's like, you know, mastering your craft, which if your craft is a very specific thing, it's important that you do that. I wouldn't blame music school or any particular thing about that, but it seems, yeah, like you said, you know, you don't know a lot of people who do that. And I suspect it might have something to do with the narrowing of focus.
Yeah, and I would also say laziness, frankly. For myself, it's certainly laziness. It's because I get in my car, I just want to quickly find some playlist that I know that I like, which is probably something super commercial and something I've seen it everywhere, and that's what I play. And I think what you're saying too also makes sense. Like, yeah, there is a tunneled vision when you are trying to master some piece or whatever, and you listen to that over and over and over again to try to find something new or find a new interpretation of it, especially in classical music. But one thing I wish I was trained at an earlier age was something like improvisation, for that very reason, which is also ties into what you were mentioning earlier about wanting to learn jazz and the song that you mentioned in the Spitfire questions as well. Because I feel like improvisation is really the truest form of musical language, because it's the most like spoken word too. It's the most like language speaking. We don't have a script that we're saying anything to each other.
Right.
We're coming up with our sentences as we go. Yeah,
I mean, I would probably tend to agree with you, but I'm going to stand up for my fellow classical musicians.
Okay.
In that I think that it's just different, and much like the truest form of acting isn't necessarily improv, but just getting inside of a character or getting inside of a performance and bringing out the most of whatever that is an art form. It's different than being able to improvise, but it is interesting. Yeah, I think it's really common for classical musicians to like look on the other side of the chasm.
Oh,
yeah, okay. Whatever it is. At jazz musicians or improvising musicians, not necessarily even jazz, but like other musical traditions and cultures that utilize that, where improvisation is a bigger part of what they do and what they practice. And we think, I can't play my instrument because I can't do that. But it's, you know, it's a different thing. It's a classical thing. There's like classical acting or something. It's like you're studying the score, you're studying the script, and you're finding what's in there, and then you're bringing it to life. That's a really cool thing too.
Right. That's what I do as a profession myself. Yes, but
right. What you do is sick, Patty. It's awesome.
Oh, well, I didn't mean that, but thank you. Yeah, I guess I understand what you're saying. But in doing the hyper-focusedness, there is a lack of versatility. And I think that's what I find super intriguing about not just you in pursuits of your profession, but also sitting in Spotify and opening up, unlocking all kinds of different avenues of musical inspiration. And that's something that maybe I just speak for myself, and that I like haven't done it as much as I should. Or, I mean, the other thing too is I should also note that for a lot of musicians, and I also fall into this camp at times, there is what I would like to call music fatigue, where you just get a little bit tired of concert going, you get a little bit tired of listening to music. And so that might be another excuse.
I experienced that as well. Maybe the answer is just listen to something else. Put on something that's just like blatantly background music, just like some like hair salon house beats, and just appreciate it for what it is. And it's just like, this is really chill right now, and I don't want to listen to anything intense. And that's what that music is. And that's sometimes just like the right thing for the mood. I guess that's what DJs do, is like they know when to play what.
Totally, right? This absolutely
really hard to do.
Mm-hmm. mad respect for DJs.
That's like my nightmare is like at a party when people are like, oh, you picked the music, and they hand me their phone. I'm like, oh my God, are you ready to wait 45 minutes for me to pick the first song?
Yeah, totally. I have that. But at least you have more under your wing, though. Okay, now's the time for me to ask you what artists inspire you the most as of recent, maybe, or just in your searching and discovering.
That's a good question. So you had asked me earlier a couple musical heroes. Is this separate from that?
Yes.
Okay.
I think of musical heroes like these are people that I am constantly am inspired by.
Right. So some musicians that I've kind of discovered in the past couple of years that are kind of like outside of what I guess I would, normally listen to is I really like Sturgill Simpson. He's a country singer, songwriter, amazing voice, great songwriting, and discovered that I kind of like country music. I went through
my God. No.
Yeah, I know. Right?
What are you saying? No, I'm just kidding. I know that country music gets such a bad rap, but I also got into country music, especially when I was living in Texas, because everywhere you hear country music, right?
Yeah. So Sturgill Simpson has an amazing cover of Nirvana's In Bloom.
Oh.
Which is a great song. And it's kind of like psychedelic country take, like a classic old school country ballad take on it with some like psychedelic production. It's really cool. And you just gotta, it really changes the tone of that really dark grunge song.
Yeah.
It's amazing.
Okay.
Another tune is Railroad of Sin. That's a great one. I dig that.
And that's his own original writing. And
yeah, these are like old, that's like an original tune. I'm also really into this, and this is maybe not a new artist that I've discovered, but they're constantly like reinventing themselves. And it's this band Deerhoof. They're an indescribable band other than they're a rock band that just has this chaotic energy that's combined with this really unique, cute vocal style. And then there's just like noise improvisation thing happening at the same time. Yeah, you just got to check them out. They're amazing. But their most recent album that came out is really cool because they made a medley of music that has inspired them. And it includes like a lot of mid 20th century classical composers like Stockhausen and Luigi Nono and like their rock band interpretations of those mixed in with lots of other inspiration from noise music that they're into or like pop songs that they were influenced by. They performed the whole thing live as a recording. They just like tracked it like as a live band because they're also like virtuosic performers at the same time. So they're like a chamber noise rock group. In a sense. It's crazy. They're amazing though.
So they're improvising the whole time.
No, they're not necessarily. No, but there's they write tunes and make albums and play songs, but there's this like freewheeling sort of energy to it.
Cool. Yeah. So just that entire album, what is it called?
Love Lore.
Okay. Was it during the pandemic that they released that?
Yeah, it's just this year.
Oh wow.
I know the people who are like recording like tons of music and releasing it during this year, like it's crazy to me. Hats off.
Yeah, seriously. I mean, I feel like so many artists are doing that. Is there other inspirations?
Well, recently, actually, last night I went down a Lil Wayne listening rabbit hole.
Oh, interesting.
And I was listening to the old Lil Wayne tracks back when he was like a local artist in New Orleans, I think. And actually, I remember seeing a music video from like one of the groups he was in. I think they're called the Hot Boys. And yeah, I was listening to one of those songs that I remember from back then, like 97, 98. And, Lil Wayne is an interesting character. And musically, he's come a long way. He's gone in a lot of different directions, and so it was just kind of fascinating to listen through his like catalog.
Yeah,
it's massive. But prolific artists like that, even though he's like not necessarily my like favorite musician in a sense, but like it's just amazing just how much music this guy puts out.
Yeah,
I mean, I think I just randomly was like, I feel like listening to a Lil Wayne song that I remember, and then it just turned into this thing, and I probably won't go down that
rabbit hole
like for another few years. But
yeah, okay. What do you find in listening to all this music that changes or inspires you in your composition?
I think just by allowing myself to appreciate different types of music or even look through an artist's catalog in a sense, or like listen to like where they were in 1997 versus 2007 versus 2017, and realizing there's a lot there and there's a lot of variety, that it just helps me feel more comfortable putting something down on paper, in the sense that like for a lot of my life, the barrier to composition was the like, is this going to be my musical statement? The stakes were so high seeming all the time. They never are, though. It's just, yeah, go for it. And then maybe in a few years, you're coming up with something totally different. And that's fine. And I think like a lot of these really successful artists do that. And, you know, they don't seem to belabor the process. They're professional about what they decide to release, but it's not so precious. Just go for it, try, it'll get better. You'll never improve if you don't.
I mean, this sounds so full circle from a previous part of the conversation we had about performing, right?
Totally.
Yeah.
I was just going to say I'm a complete person now. The full circle. I am whole.
Yes, you are. Well, thanks, David, for introducing me to some more new music, and I'll get out of my comfort zone. Well, I haven't listened to him in a really long time, frankly. That'll be my next on my Spotify queue. Do you have like a playlist? You should create a playlist on Spotify. Cool.
It's not a bad idea. I mean, I have like my liked songs, which is
then
a running playlist.
We just need to be friends on Spotify, and then I can listen to all the things you're listening to.
Friends on Spotify? Is that something you can do?
Yeah.
Oh, wow. Cool.
But anyway, can I ask you 2 final questions?
Sure.
What, in your opinion, is the most common misconception of classical music and the classical music world?
I think a common misconception is that you have to be from a certain place or be a certain type of person or have a certain background in order to enjoy it as a listener, in order to like learn more about it or to enjoy the music for what it is without having any other background information. I think there's usually this sense that you need to have more, like you need to have the program notes to go along with it, which while that stuff is nice and helpful, I think that that's not necessary. Anyone can dig it.
Yeah, I mean, if you think about it too, all music has fundamental roles. For instance, there's a melody, there's a counter melody, there's harmony, there's rhythm, there's a bass line, right? There's that
was literally in my mixing textbook. Like those 5 things.
Yes.
Like literally in this book I was reading about mixing. You are a mix master.
That's cool. I didn't realize I just quoted your textbook.
It was like word for word. The 5 pillars of like what's in a good mix or whatever.
Yeah. But isn't that all that music really is? I mean, and so why is it more quote unquote accessible to listen to Lady Gaga versus a Mozart string quartet? You could even quote like a Led Zeppelin live album or something that goes on for like how many more times or something. That song goes on forever and ever. But like, why is that easier to listen to than Shostakovich string quartet number 7?
As a hypothetical question, like, I don't know. I think
is
we
it because
could probably
there's words to it. Like that's where I always wonder too. I mean, you could say with opera too, right? I don't know. Anyway,
I mean, the list goes on and on. I think of why. I think a big part of it is like rhythm and groove. Whereas, you know, even like the Led Zeppelin example, it's long, but there's a groove. So it's kind of this. There's the same thing that's happening. So you kind of get lulled into this repeating figure that's maybe changes over time, but you're not like constantly listening to something new. Whereas a Shostakovich string quartet, it's like a straight line from beginning to end. And there's no point where you like are in this like cyclical thing. And I think like a lot of pop music has that. A lot of rock music has that. A lot of, you know, like hip hop, just a lot of different types of music has this more like groove based feel, which is maybe just more immediately attractive to people for who knows why.
Well, it gets you moving. I guess that all makes sense. Yeah. And I get maybe Shostakovich 7 was not the best example because basically what you're describing in the Led Zeppelin is, or what I am associating is an ostinato. It's what is constantly being played over and over again. And I should have maybe said one of the movements in the Rite of Spring. Yeah. Something like that. It riffs on top of a tuba bass line that keeps going and going. But that's a whole other side episode to talk about. Yeah. But I do think that there are more similarities than there are differences.
For sure. Those elements that you mentioned about them, you know, melody, counter melody, rhythm, harmony, bass, like that's in everything. So you might have to search a little more in some genres to like find those things, or maybe they're just a little more masked. I don't know.
Or the structure's different too. Yeah, I mean, I guess with pop and rock music, most commonly it's a very solidified structure. So that's something that people can hold on to. And a comment that people get often with classical music or with jazz music is that they don't understand the structure, right?
Yeah.
That's another element. But anyway, obviously, can of worms, I'm going to put it away now.
Yeah, for sure.
My second question, after all the impact that COVID has done to classical music, what do you think is something positive that will enhance and carry on in our profession?
I think that access and communication for musicians to each other is really positive. For example, you and I are talking right now through this technology that we're really comfortable with at this point.
Mm-hmm.
And beforehand, there was, you being like on the other side of the country. That's like just a huge barrier to being able to communicate. And even beyond just like now you can actually make music with people remotely that way, either through recording or even through some like minor latency jamming, you can do it. It's sort of like leveled the playing field a little bit in the sense that like it's compressed the hierarchy between people who've been in the game longer and have accomplished more and have more access versus people who are in other situations. And it's given everyone the opportunity to connect in a way that they didn't think they could. Even though this technology has like been here, we didn't think that we could use it in this way. And also just the networking and helping each other out type of thing that has been going on a little bit, I think is a positive.
Yeah. I was just thinking the other day, similarly to what you were saying previously, in doing this podcast, I have guests that are in England and in Germany. And normally when I was growing up as a kid, if my family wanted to call Taiwan and call my relatives over there, we would have to buy a calling card that had a preset amount of minutes on it. And then we have to dial this really long serial number and then dial our Taiwan number that we were trying to get and then hope that they would pick up, right? And that's only back in the 90s or like early 2000s. That wasn't even that long. I mean, 20 years ago, but nowadays it's just so advanced and we don't have holograms yet. But I mean, at the same time, we can do so much more and so much quicker than we could back in my earlier years, I guess,
Right. Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, it's pretty amazing what we've come to expect from the technology now. And going back even like half a step is like unbearable when your internet is like kind of slow for a second.
Right.
You just like devolve into absolute rage.
Yeah. I mean, dial tones and everything.
Oh, yeah.
Excruciating.
I remember that.
Yeah. But anyway, okay. David, are there any platforms or websites for listeners to learn more about you or any upcoming projects?
I have a website, davidgonzalesguitar.com. That's got my info. It has some recordings. That's got a link to album I recorded with my duo. And also it's the future location of my portfolio. We're going to be putting some of the music that I'm working on and kind of linking from there.
Cool. And if you enjoyed listening to this podcast, go ahead and press that subscribe button and leave a review on Apple Podcasts. The reviews and ratings help this podcast be more visible to others, and it's a free way to support the podcast. Another free way is to tell your friends and family about it, which is really easy to do. And you can always become part of the Haydn Behind the Music Stand family by donating to our Patreon page at patreon.com/Haydn Music Stand. Don't forget, there's a Spotify playlist available that contains all the pieces we've discussed on the podcast. And now we'll have some more awesome tunes courtesy of David Gonzales as well.
Woo!
It's all really great music, and the link is always in the description of each episode. Follow us on our social media, Facebook, Instagram, and Twitter, all at Haydn Music Stand. David, thank you so much for being on the show. It's so good to see you again.
It's great to see you. Thank you so much for having me on, Patty. This has been a lot of fun.
Yeah, and thanks for letting me pick your brain as well about music.
Thank you for asking.
Okay. We can just keep on this loop of...
Yeah, let's just keep thanking each other back and forth.
Yeah, sounds good. Okay, and thanks for listening. Say bye, Sushi.
It's blue water?
I flavor it, yeah.
Oh, gotcha. Mio?
Yes.
Nice. I got to get some of that for Natalie so she drinks water.
She doesn't drink water?
I try to, I mean, she drinks enough water, yeah. I don't want to throw her under the bus right now.
Okay, sorry, go on.